Good morning. Welcome to this time. I'm coming to you from our sanctuary at First Presbyterian Church in San Rafael. We are 5 months into this pandemic and staying at home and changing our regular rhythms. I'm aware today of just thinking about how many challenges we are facing in our own lives and communities, in our country and around the world. That we continue to face great challenges as we get closer to schools opening and decisions about education of children and young people. We are thinking about the health and well-being of ourselves and our neighbors and the great loss and grief that we feel. We are facing a reckoning about racial inequalities and injustices. We are facing a tremendous economic downturn and great loss of income and jobs. Today, right now in Northern California, we are in the midst of a heat wave, and many places around the world facing great heat and fire, and it's a challenging time. I invite you right now into this time to be open to the Spirit, to take some deep breaths, to know that you may have many names by which you go by, but that your true name is beloved.
Holy One, may we be found and may we find a place called home, a place where faith holds us and grace renews us, where forgiveness longs for us to be who you will us to be. May we find a place called home where we are accepted as we are, where we are taken in and loved unconditionally. A place called home where we belong and our souls fit, and our questions are allowed, and our anger is heard, and our needs are recognized, and our pain is held, and our names are known. And may this be that place, O God, this community, this group of travelers and doubters and companions on the way. This home where your place is our place, and place isn't a building, but a way of being together in relationship held together by love. Loving God, homecoming God, may we make this a home to all who still yet seek, a place of grace-filled of sanctuary and gracious welcome.
Our reading today comes from the book of 1 Kings from the Hebrew Scriptures, chapter 19. We pick up the story of the prophet Elijah. He has been tested in his faith and loyalty to Yahweh, but he is now fleeing in fear. He has gone into the wilderness. He has been fed and offered food by an angel, and then he hides in a cave. Let us listen now for this word to us from 1 Kings 19, beginning in verse 11. The voice said to Elijah, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after a fire, a sheer sound of silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in a mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. Let us pause for a moment of prayer. Holy One, we have heard this ancient story. May we hear your word, your truth for us, that we might be transformed. Amen. We have a need to name things. Certainly, choosing names for babies is an exciting moment. We have a new baby in our family. My nephew Matt and his wife welcomed Colt Cochran on August 4th. I'm intrigued by his name, and I need to learn more about how they chose it. When I was expecting our first child and Jeffrey and I were discussing names, we noted that both of our fathers were named Jack. So after a few days of thinking about it, we named our son Jackson. We have a need to name seasons in our life. Maybe we're in the season of retirement, or early career, or college age, or midlife crisis, or empty nest. And often how we name things help us frame it or reframe it in ways that are helpful and important. In this season of Black Lives Matter and wrestling with the history of racial injustices, we hear the refrain, say their names. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin. There are many, too many, and their names matter. We can also see how our names and images of God, of the holy, can stick with us and can change and evolve. Elijah has been a dedicated prophet of Yahweh, the God of Israel and all the world. Elijah fled into the wilderness because the evil queen Jezebel had a contract out on his life, and he was scared to death of her. He had good reason to be afraid. He had just staged a contest on Mount Carmel between himself, the one lonely prophet of Yahweh, and 450 prophets of the god Baal, whom Jezebel worshipped. This contest was whose God is real and powerful. Well, when it came time, Baal was nowhere to be found. But Yahweh sent a blast of fire from the heavens that no one present could deny. The name of Baal was worthless. Elijah won. But Queen Jezebel was not going to give up that easily. She vowed to kill this troublesome prophet of Yahweh. I'm going to get you, is basically what she said, and threatened. So Elijah feared for his life, and he ran. I've had enough. In the story, an angel brings food to Elijah in the wilderness so that he can continue on his journey. But then Elijah hides in a cave. And in verse 9, we read those words. Elijah went into a cave and spent the night, and the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing in here, Elijah? And then Elijah responds, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. I think he's saying, I'm your prophet. I've been faithful. I called upon you, Lord, and you showed your power. But now I'm afraid and exhausted and alone. He can only see this small picture of his life. He wants to stay in the cave. He cannot see a way out to proceed. So, Yahweh shakes things up a bit. Elijah is stuck, literally. And Yahweh, the one whose power brought fire down on the altar and won the whose deity is better contest, talks to Elijah and then says, get ready for a surprise. Come out of the cave and I'm going to pass by. Elijah, who knows you cannot look at God and live, is probably ready for lightning bolts or claps of thunder, something big, something flashy, something Steven Spielberg, something Cecil B. DeMille. That's how he knows that God is there. And some of those things happen. There was the wind. There was an earthquake. There was a fire. But each time the story reads, but God was not in the wind or the earthquake or the fire, but in a sheer sound of silence. The King James Version of the Bible translates those words, a still, small voice, a gentle whisper. When Elijah hears that sound, he wraps his face in a mantle, basically to protect himself before going out of the cave to encounter Yahweh. And Yahweh repeats the previous question, what are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah repeats this mantra of his previous complaint. I am your prophet. I am faithful. I'm the only one left. He doesn't seem to have understood God's theophany, God's self-revelation. This direct encounter with God does not automatically change his mind or change the name by which he calls God. And yet here it was. God was present for him in that moment. Quiet presence. A voice only he could hear, near and not far off. Then Yahweh tells him not to stay in the cave and to continue his work as a prophet and be ready to pass the mantle to Elisha. Elijah finally agrees to go. He will proceed and go north to face the next part of his journey. We want to know what we're facing and who we're facing so we know how to proceed. And when we're in the midst of things, it can be difficult to understand what we're facing, how long it will go on, what the outcome will be, and how to move through it. Sometimes it's only in looking back that we gain recognition and understanding. I wonder how long young John Lewis would have named his first walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge compared to what that event has come to mean in our collective narrative as a country. How was it named and described then? How do we see it now? How we name things affects how we respond and how we act in response. There's a powerful little book I read a few years ago about naming. It's a small book, but it is a powerful one. It's by Matthew Fox, mystic, spiritual rebel, source of the theology of blessing. It's called Naming the Unnamable, and it's about the most unnamable subject of all, God. Fox includes 89 names for God. Some are familiar to us as Christians and Christian biblical foundations. One of the first names he says, God is love. Another one he names is God is Emmanuel. God is with us. Others kind of pique our imagination. God is the artist of artists. Some of Fox's names point to a spiritual underpinning of all things. God is the cosmic Christ, or Buddha nature, a transcendent divine presence. Fox includes a whole section on feminine names for God, such as the Jewish Shekinah, the glory of the divine presence. Some names Fox offers may surprise you, like God is chaos. The point is not to say that God inflicts chaos upon us, but rather, as Fox put it, chaos seems part of our creative process. This name, which is one of the feminine names, honors the times of chaos have the potential to be times of birth, the birth of new life, new ways of being, and new ways of being together. We have been exploring God as midwife in our Wednesday book study of John Philip Newell's book, The Rebirthing of God. How is God as midwife rebirthing the church, rebirthing our church, rebirthing Christianity? How is she inviting us to be intentional about this process? One name I've grown increasingly fond of is God is mystery. There's a skill of living with mystery. It's harder than living with certainty. It's more expansive. One of the books I read recently is called The Opposite of Certainty: Fear, Faith, and Life in Between by Janine Urbanek-Reed. It's a powerful book written by a local author from Marin County about her journey with her son who has a brain tumor. She writes honestly about how her faith and understanding of God evolves and changes as she faces so much uncertainty and medical mysteries with her son. Yes, God as mystery is a name I have come to love and need. In this book of Naming the Unnamable, Fox moves us beyond the accepted names of God and Christianity, which are far fewer than in Judaism and Islam, not to mention Hinduism and many indigenous traditions. And he invites us into that expansiveness. This challenges us that the exclusive naming rights of God have often been seen to belong to the institutional church. It doesn't do away, Fox isn't suggesting that we do away with the need for institutions, but shifts their purpose. They become more focused on being centers that bring people together for community and shared practice and the teaching of deep wisdom and engaging in social action. Fox wants to restore trust in the human experience of God, which is a mystical path. God calls Elijah by name and tells him not to stay in the cave, but to come out and trust God's presence even in that still small voice, an unnamable voice. Isn't that a calling for us now? Not to retreat back into comfort, but to stay engaged, to keep going until we can wrestle some blessing out of this time. Living into deeper and broader names and images of the holy blesses us with a wisdom and an ability to rename and reframe the realities and struggles for us now. Think about how this time could be renamed if we hang in there with it. What if these times became known not just for the vast inequities exposed, but for the ways we address them? Think of what families across the country are facing now, the question of schooling for their children. We already see some families coming together and hiring private tutors or teachers for their children. And who can blame them for giving the best for their kids? And yet we're concerned about children who may not, and families who may not have access to those resources. What if our church is able to offer space and resources for underserved children so they're not left behind? We could name this as a new season of partnerships for social action and service in our community. Naming this season in our lives and world matters. One of my favorite creative pieces that has come out of this time of the pandemic is a poem and a video called The Great Realization. It was created by English poet and writer Thomas Roberts. The Great Realization was released on YouTube on April 29th, and it has been viewed tens of millions of times. It's been translated into multiple languages. It's a simple rhyming poem created to be a bedtime story. It takes on profound themes of greed and families struggling to connect, the pandemic, ecological degradation, the need for community. Somehow it addresses multiple crises in the pre-pandemic world and moves toward a happy and hopeful ending. The story is set in an unspecified year in the future, and the poem looks back at pre-pandemic life and then names this season we are in as the Great Realization, sparked by this plague. What if these times were named and marked as a return to the unity through coming together to face this common threat? What if these times were remembered the potential of science to support human life and recommitted ourselves to its respect and pursuit? What if these times when we relearned the value of sacrifice for the good of our neighbor? What if we marked and named these times as a time we rediscovered our inner strength we didn't know we had? Times we forged new connections across old borders and boundaries. Times our faith grew up, took root, and bore new fruit. A liminal time, a threshold time, a rebirthing time. And how would you like this time in your life, our life, to be named? Let's be open to the ways the Holy One, the divine midwife, the still small voice, calls us to this journey of hope and transformation and compassion. Amen.
Silence is a friend who claims us, cools the heat and slows the pace. God it is who speaks knows how